Monkey.
And it's recording. All right, so I'll start with the intro, and then we'll
Okay,
get.
yeah, for sure.
All right, so yeah, this is the Infinite Investment Game, and I am talking with Raul from AIH. All right, let's get started. So I actually just watched a video from Sports Cards once again. It talked about like what affects sports car prices and what people talk about and buy. And a big driver is not really like the experts, but like the casual fan. So like there's a lot of basketball players, right, that play very well. And for whatever reason, you see like a lot of prospects, even at their height, you could tell that they probably won't be as good as, let's say, Tyler Hero won't be as good as like Drew Holiday in a sense.
Right.
Like if you are deep into basketball, you already know that. But for whatever reason, you know, Tyler Hero is probably not now, but at the time is like it was way more expensive than like a Drew Holiday card. And even though it's like way a higher pop count with Tyler Hero than Drew Holiday. And like, I guess people who are trying to invest and make money, sometimes I guess like if you know, like someone like me who is historic, I guess for me, has been like really into sports and know a lot about that sport and a lot about players. It doesn't really work that way when people are trying to, you know, collecting, it doesn't really matter, but if people are trying to like invest or flip, it seems like to have like a negative effect on people.
So in terms of prospecting, the Tyler Hero, I'm not into basketball as I once was, maybe in the 90s and early 2000s. But I do remember the Heat during the bubble. They were doing pretty well with Jimmy Butler, and Tyler Hero was a card that was chased like crazy. And in regards to prospecting, I mean, Tyler Hero, if you just go to another sport, he's not on the level maybe of like a Mike Trout or baseball. If you go to football, Patrick Mahomes, even though he's losing Tyreek Hill. So you just saw in 2020, those cards just went up crazy because obviously we were locked up at home. We had stimulus checks given to many people. So people are just bored at home, couldn't go to games, and they were just throwing their money out there. They're like, oh, Tyler Hero, he's on the Heat. They're in the finals, right? So people were trying to just put all of this money into a card that in a normal situation wouldn't have the demand that it would compared to today. But because the pandemic was such a different environment, they're throwing money at him like he's a phenomenal player, and not to disrespect his skill level. I mean, it just wasn't warranted as his price. So if you look at, you're talking about how people are putting money into cards, I would say it's supply and demand, and just the demand was overstretched at that moment, and now it's come back to reality, in my opinion.
Yeah. Actually, me thinking about football, like this upcoming football season and like what people are like putting their money into is really interesting because like Patrick Mahomes, out of the younger quarterbacks, I guess from drafted from 2017 onward, like Patrick Mahomes has accomplished the most, but he's like the least sought after, which is really interesting. And yeah, I guess, you know, he's doesn't have, I guess, Tyreek Hill. And, you know, I guess certain people thought he was going to win a few more Super Bowls in this time frame or whatever. But I mean, if you look at the history of football outside of like Tom Brady, there aren't really many quarterbacks have like won back-to-back Super Bowls. So or even in a short amount of time, it's very, very, very rare. Even some of the best ever, like Peyton Manning, he only has 2 Super Bowls. Brett Favre has 1, and these are guys at one point they were the best quarterback in the league. They were winning MVPs. They were dominant, and they were head and shoulders above the competition. And you can even argue someone like Brett Favre. There's like a golden age they would consider of quarterbacks. So it's one of those things where I just would think that by now people will realize that some of these guys that people are buying is just a straight up flip. And it's just like, all right, I just need to undercut everybody else. And I'm just playing this game. And it's almost like flippers selling the flippers. I mean, because I just think you just look at history of like quarterbacks drafted in each 10 years. I did this with basketball too. And like how many of these guys actually become all-time greats. But it's not only how many become all-time greats, it's like how many people really care about. Like a lot of people don't care about Drew Brees like that. A lot of people don't care about Ben Roethlisberger like that. But you can argue they could be in the top 10 depending on what requirements you have.
Yeah, I mean, you get into an interesting topic. Manning had 2 Super Bowls. You had Brett Favre that had 1. When I was growing up, it was everyone talked about Troy Aikman, and I think he won what 4 Super Bowls, I believe, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and I remember before the pandemic, I remember selling a card to a guy on OfferUp, and he said that, man, these cards should be worth much more. And I'm like, yeah, it should be worth much more. And then cards during the pandemic, they just boomed up like crazy. They were undervalued, in my opinion, during the pandemic, and now they've come back to earth to a certain degree, but during the pandemic, they're overstretched. And yeah, like you're talking about, in 2020, people are just throwing a ridiculous amount of money into Patrick Mahomes. And I was buying Patrick Mahomes cards. I talked about it. I think I had a 2017 Optic Hollow PSA 10, right? It was $140 at the time. And I sold it for 3,300 bucks or gross or net. So yeah, it was an easy flip. And obviously with Patrick Mahomes on his rookie contract, it made sense for him to have that much success with Andy Reid and obviously Tyreek Hill and just that phenomenal offensive scheme that Reid put together. And now we have prices coming back to normal, or not back to normal. I still think they are overstretched on the high end to some degree, but these cards, yeah, it was just a flipper's dream. And now many flippers are trying to figure out, hey, what should I flip next? It's not as easy as it was in 2019, 2020. Everyone was making money. Now you have to be very skillful in flipping. You have to buy up collections, or you have to buy up cards that are just on the cheap.
Yeah, like it was like all collectibles, because there's some people. Even when I was in the Air Force, there's some people who were into. Some people were into shoes, and they were pretty successful with like flipping sneakers. But another person, they were into like antique Civil War guns and like Revolutionary guns. Yeah. And he was like bought a gun for like $1,700 and then sold it, or it was worth $6,500. Stuff like that is harder for that stuff to really tank, because it's history behind it and there's high demand, and some of that stuff can fit in a museum. But it was that, and recently at Yale, there was like a medical school student who was talking to me about plants, certain types of plants that people were like flipping, I guess, online. And some of these plants got to $5,000, but now they're $50. So I think it was just money everywhere, and people just
2020, I assume.
Yeah, 2020, and I think beginning of 2021. Yeah, people were just crazy. Also, I originally started in Yu-Gi-Oh! And there were some certain Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards that were like $1,000, $1,700, something like that, and they shot for like $20,000. And then I mean, Pokemon, that's probably more crazy, just because I heard some people talking about it, like when Pokemon Go came out 2015, 2016, stuff started going up, but there was some stuff around that time that were $50 that ended up becoming literally 10K, 20K cards by like 2020, 2021. And I think this is something I kind of talk about where a lot of people made money buying the wrong thing at the right time. I think there's two things that happen. You can buy the right thing at the wrong time. So you buy, I don't know, LeBron James PSA 10 refractor for I don't know $300,000 or something, or base 10 LeBron for 46,000 or 40,000 or $30,000. Like maybe that's the right card. Maybe over time, like it grows in value. But if you buy it at the wrong time, like it's gonna take you forever to recruit your investment, or you may never recoup your investment. And then the opposite, which I think this is even more dangerous, buying the wrong thing at the right time, because you make money, but then you reinforce bad behavior. So now you're buying second-year cards, third-year cards, championship cards. Then you're buying like PSA 8 or 9 cards or whatever, because percentage-wise, maybe that goes up the most. But then you kind of get stuck on a cycle trying to do that when the market crashes or take big dips. And then that's the thing that doesn't actually recover.
Oh, yeah. And I think what happened is there have been a lot of content creators over the past few years, some flippers, some not. You know, I'm one of them, but I came in more towards when the boom was coming, but I was a little more cautious. But a lot of people got confident and they're like, hey, I 3x my money. It took a $500 card and turned it into $1,500 within 3 months. I did that with the Michael Phelps signed autograph card. This was like before the Olympics started. This was like 2020, 2021. And no one was chasing Olympics, and then people started to chase Olympics. So then you had people who weren't sophisticated thinking, hey, this is a get rich scheme, but in reality, there's a reversion to the mean. So it's a law of numbers. So eventually, if something's going up 3x like that in 3 months, well, it could go up 3x, but it may take maybe a couple of years instead, if you're lucky. So a lot of people got emboldened. They didn't look at basic mathematics. And once again, people made bad decisions. It enabled bad behavior, like you're mentioning during the pandemic. And it's unfortunate because now, I don't know if you've noticed that there were a bunch of content creators in 2020. I used to watch them. I don't see them anymore. I don't see them posting on Instagram. I'm not hating on them. I'd love to see them do content, right? I want to see everyone do content, even if I don't agree with the person. And obviously I'm opinionated, but I do want to hear different voices and different opinions. That's how you learn. And you're not seeing that. And this bad behavior, unfortunately, has stopped people from making content. And some people have left. They're on to the next thing now. And now people are bitter against, you know, some content creators, which shouldn't be happening, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, one of the things is, yeah, I've noticed that because one of the people I was like listening to was like the High Upside, and they just like disappeared off the map. I think it was PSA Collector. He was one of the first people really making content about like investing in cards. And he came to Graded Card Investor, and then he's completely disappeared. Like, and I don't know, like he has so many views on videos and so many subscribers, and unless somebody like he got sued by somebody or something, and something crazy happened.
Wait, he did get sued?
No, I'm speculating that could be something like that, but I don't know at all. But just for someone in his position just to disappear off the map, something serious probably happened. Where, yeah, because I think the way he was starting, it was like him and the Sports Card Investor, where maybe his channel wouldn't be as big as Sports Card Investor's channel, but I would think it'd be much bigger than what it is now, because he has like 66,000 subscribers or so 70,000 subscribers, and I don't know if he's made content in like I don't know, 8 months or something like that. So it's just one of those things. But yeah, there's quite a few people. Even if I go and search for content, a lot of people have dropped off completely. Yeah, I think one of the things I think that had a major effect because August of 2020 when stuff was like insane. I think Giannis base 10 cards were like for Panini Prism got to like going to $7,000 to $8,000, and I had a couple of them, and I had some BJ's 9.5s, and I was like, I was planning to hold this for 2 or 3 years, but like the way this is going, once it gets to around $8,000 to $9,000, I'm just completely selling because I'm gonna like 10x my money because I bought them at $700 to $800. And then it crashed. I'm pretty sure it crashed just because the NBA players basically decided not to play. And I think that put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because one, it kind of scared some people because they're just like, wait a minute, they can just decide not to play. So I'm just gonna like take my gains now. And I don't know if they're gonna be another lockdown in a sense, and then maybe they won't have another season or something like that. And then also I think um, a lot of people who maybe were into let's say LeBron James, um, his show, and maybe like him being so vocal on politics, actually turned a lot of people off because I think there's a certain percent of people who probably had his cards that they saw it as an investment, but they just want him to play basketball and focus only on that. And I think maybe a lot of people end up selling. And then I think that next wave of people coming in was a lot of it was influenced by Gary Vaynerchuk, getting a bunch of people in. And then I want to say probably another entrepreneur, Patrick David. And he probably, I don't know how well he knows Gary Vaynerchuk, but probably from the people in his circles, he knew a lot of people were gonna like jump into the sports car market. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the companies like Rally, Collectible, Otis, and I think a few more coming up were like buying high-end cars and wanted to do deals with him. Because like Patrick David was the one who sold the two Wayne Gretzky's. He bought them like 2015 or 16, I believe, and then he sold them for like over $1 million or whatever. And he actually, I was like listening to something because he mostly talks more about like politics and finance on other stuff, and like the card thing is like a hobby for him. But he does like he's more of like a investor slash flipper, so he's trying to like buy something and double his money every year, 2 years, maybe 5 years with it, and he plays this game of doubles that he calls it. But he was saying that like sports cars are going to get much cheaper in a sense. From his opinion, from me listening to some of the more recent stuff from Garyvee, he wants to stay positive, but I think I get the read that he knows that like things are going to be more on a downturn in a sense as far as cards, and it's going to be a struggle for a lot of people, I think. And then everybody knows about what Vegas Dave said. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just thinking about a few of the things you're saying. So Gary V, actually I found this out through Ziggy, and he did a video I think a month and a half ago. This was you're talking about prices were crazy in August of 2020. So he pointed to a video from Luca Nation podcast. I don't know if you've heard of them. I've been on their program twice, and they had a guest on who I think is buddies with Gary Vee, and they were on a Zoom call. And apparently, Gary Vee was able to convince all these high net worth individuals like Steve Aoki to just buy all these basketball cards. And I think LeBron James was part of it. And I know you did talk about LeBron James and the political talk, and that's why people weren't buying. But I thought August 2020, people were just buying up the cards like crazy at that time. And then the peak happened, I think, in February or March, but I think that was more of Fleer 86 from my memory. I mean, it went to what, if the sales were legitimate, what, 700, $800,000
Mm-hmm.
on Golden or PWCC, one of those two auction houses. But yeah, that was that. And then you're talking about Patrick Bet-David. I don't know if you saw that interview with Jeremy Lee a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago.
About Sports Card Live.
Yeah, he's on Sports Card Live. You should. That was one of the best interviews that I've seen, and that's when I first heard of this guy. And he
Yeah, I
was
saw that one.
okay. Yeah, that was just an amazing interview, and he was talking about, the sports card market pretty much is going to come down when the Federal Reserve is going to raise rates. This is a short-term thing, and
Mm-hmm.
what did they do this year? They aggressively raised interest rates, and other interest rates went up as well, like the 10-year rate. And then sports cards have taken a huge hit, and
Mm-hmm.
other markets too, crypto, stock market, etc., the whole 9 yards. So he was right about this, but I think from Patrick Bet-David's standpoint, he's still bullish long term. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
there's a time to buy and then there's a time to sell, and that's how I think he views the markets.
Yeah, I do think there is something I'm trying to like figure out here, just because the world is about to enter a recession, but depending on the country, it's gonna be different. It may be mild for America compared to the rest of the world, because there's a lot of, I mean, I know a lot about geopolitics compared to the average person, partly because of my job in the Air Force when I was in the Air Force, but also there's just certain people I follow. I think there's a great fear about like a famine. It's not going to affect most first world countries, but it's going to affect like a lot of second, third world countries. And there's certain stuff where I think a lot of these, I know people enter the sports card market to kind of escape the real world in a sense, but like some of that stuff does affect us. Like I remember I was like buying Mbappe cards from a guy in Russia. I can't do that anymore. And stuff like that where you're gonna have issue with famine starting in fall. And this is going to be a couple year thing, and obviously food is going up, but it's going to continue to go up. For us, it's going to be a little unrest, but like it's going to affect other countries worse, especially the Middle East. I'm not sure how much that would affect, let's say, the World Cup in Qatar starting in November or whatever. But then a lot of that stuff, there's a domino effect where that leads to war. People get displaced, migration, more pandemics because, people, there's a famine, they're going to try to eat whatever they can. Some stuff is not best to eat. You kind of have this whole thing with the whole world overprinting money. It's not just United States. China's been overprinting money. I mean, Sri Lanka's starting to have their whole issue economically. Other countries like Pakistan looks like they're in trouble. You kind of have that. You have potential for, like I said, war, but United States and China, I don't think it's going to be direct, but I think it's probably going to be like a proxy kind of a thing where we like give Taiwan weapons and support. And is it them trying to hold off China for as long as possible and try to like bleed their economy in a sense. And then, yeah, I think that's just some of the things. I mean, you still have threats from that because I listen to other people like Ray Dalio, and he's been talking about some things. Peter Zion, who's in the geopolitics. You have this whole energy issue where the United States will probably be fine. It's just one of those things I'm trying to wrap my head around because the United States is going to have some challenges, but overall, I think the United States is going to get through everything. And most of North America will be fine. There's a political aspect that may be scary where division is really bad. Yeah, and I just from 2016 to now, I've read so many books on guys, people, just different people in different fields, from economics, history, um, geopolitics, coming to similar conclusions, even though they do different work, um, about internal conflicts and also external conflicts. And I don't see. I'm trying to figure out like what the sports card market is really going to look like, because it's hard for me to imagine like most of the rest of the world is going to hell, but everybody's making money in sport. Obviously, not everybody, but people making money in sports cards. And it's the same thing with crypto. If you talk to crypto people, they're super bullish about crypto. Like stock people, they're super bullish about stocks. Real estate, same thing. There's the fine art market now where you can invest in art with Masterworks. Uh, all collectibles, comic books, Funko Pops now, video games, VHS. If you put in some plastic and put a grade on it, apparently it's worth money now.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of good points, and it's hard to begin here. But so during tough times, people, even if they don't have a lot of money, whatever money they have, just for a collectible point or just to collect, people will still go into sports cards or Funko Pops or etc. because they want to divert their mind. Suppose they're going through a challenging situation and maybe less money is coming in for whatever reason, their hours are cut. They still need, they still have some money just to spend. So from that aspect, people will continue to collect, and I'm going to collect even if I'm in a financially difficult position, and I think most people would. But now, from an investment or speculative point of view, you made a very good point about Sri Lanka, and I follow some other people that are following economics and geopolitical issues as well. And when an economy overheats, so they go from inflation, and what I've read is that it goes to deflation eventually. And deflation, as you know, and everyone watching, prices go down. So right now, like you mentioned, we are in a what, mild recession. I don't think it's as bad as 2008 or 2020
Mm-hmm.
because 2008, I remember people wouldn't go to the malls. People are
Mm-hmm.
out and about. 2020, I remember colleagues getting laid off. I don't see that right now. People are getting raises. People are getting promoted right now where I'm at. So I don't see that. But in terms of what kind of, or what makes me a bit worried is, okay, we have inflation now, and we have these cycles, okay, inflation to deflation. You had this in the 1980s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Volcker jacked up rates, you had inflation, then you had prices coming down, you had a hard recession. We're not at the hard recession yet, but maybe a couple years from now, if we go from that process of inflation to deflation, then I believe in terms of the collectibles market, you're going to have a lot of opportunities. And I think a lot of people, like we've seen so many people leave the hobby right now. Just imagine if we go through that same cycle. You know, some people in Europe, sophisticated people saying, "Oh, we're going to have this reset." I don't know if you've heard of that, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay. They're talking about this reset. So they're talking about timeline 2023, 2025, whatever it is. If that happens, prices come down, people lose their jobs. And that's the time, in my opinion, that I want to be aggressive if I have the financial means. And if anyone has the financial means, you want to buy when there's absolute fear. And
Mm-hmm.
I bought when the stock market was tanking like crazy. I just decided to buy the Star 84 or 85 Gatorade card because look, all the guys that were saying, "Hey, be positive," I'm not knocking on them, and they were all of a sudden sounding a little bit like me. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold up a sec. Hold up. If you're saying something like me, I better be buying something at least, even though I understand the value of it may go down, but I want to buy when there's fear. So
Yeah, I kind of look at it. I more I also in the last few years started looking at things at more like cycles. I guess there's some elements to the 1970s with the whole inflation issue, but I think there's some geopolitical things where I think is more like the 1930s, and where we talk about the United States, and I think United States kind of is still in control of the sports card market and really collectibles market in general. There are a lot of other cultures that do collect things, but not to the extent like Americans do and Canadians. So I think that that's like a really good thing. Um, I actually maybe I should switch here. So like one other thing that goes through my mind is demographics actually. So North America's demographics is actually pretty good, but the rest of the world isn't looking so good. And eventually, depending, especially if you're trying to hold stuff for long term, if you're trying to hold for 10 years or something or longer, I think demographics really play a role just because as societies get more established in a sense, people have less kids and more educated overall. So people talk. This is another thing Garyvee was talking about, like China and the China market really hasn't even gotten whole yet. I know because I bought a lot of stuff from China, from cards from China. All of them are sold because I was they didn't look fake, but like there's a lot of fake stuff from China. So, but they don't have that many 25-year-olds, just because of the one child policy or whatever, and the way things are going for the future. I don't know like how well they're gonna really by like 2050, and it's still a long time from now. But like we say, once there's a next big sports card cycle where people talk about, I don't know, every 30 to 25 to 40 years or something like that, where I guess you have this craziness that we had recently in a sense. If people are trying to hold to then, things may look a lot different, and there might actually maybe less people on the planet. Maybe there'd be more wealth, but like I guess there's a lot of factors to think about when you're holding stuff long term because sports can be different, demographics could be different. Europe, for example, people, hoping, a lot of Europeans get into it, but like there are a lot of Europeans who, most of their countries don't really have that many kids. And if they do have a kid, they have one, right? And you have two people having one kid. How math works is going to be a lot less people.
Yeah, you make an interesting point. I forget what author I was reading. I referenced him in one of my videos. And he said that for the GDP of the United States to go up, you basically, obviously, if you lose people in your population over time, your GDP is eventually going to go down, right? And I'm looking at the baby boomers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of baby boomers are going to be they may be collecting Social Security right now.
Mm-hmm.
And not to be a downer, but maybe in the next 10 to 15 years, a lot of them are going to be out of the workforce, and unfortunately, they're going to be passing away.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking, if you just want to look at a collectibles point of view, a lot of these guys, you could say boomers that age, they invest and speculate a lot in baseball cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you were talking about this earlier on in one of your interviews. So if you have people that pass away, and if you're looking at the U.S. demographics in the short run, okay, you're going to have less people. That means GDP growth is not going to be strong. So, and you talked about earlier on the 1930s. You think it could be similar to that? And the 1930s, I was talking about deflation. That's what the United States experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So, what if you're in an environment where prices either go down like deflation or they just stay stagnant?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of collectibles, it's not going to be like it was in 2020, where a lot of people are just assuming, and you have all this content creators. So I just wondered if you go through a system or a time where you have somewhat of a banking crisis, just a transition. Maybe you're talking about China earlier. Maybe down the road, the United States transitions their world reserve currency to China, or maybe it's a group of nations with the United Nations, the SDR they're talking about, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Because I still think that everything's going to move over to China. I think they're changing their one policy to 3 kids, I believe, but I have to read into that more. But I think there will be a transition. Right now, it's fine, but you go through a tough environment of deflation. A lot of people that you see right now on YouTube, they're going to be out of the sports card game. That's just my feeling, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I I've mixed. So this is really interesting. I one of the things is Garyvee was one of the main people that kind of got me into sports cards because I was like into cards and collectibles or interested in it always, but it was more like on the Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and also just anime side.
Yeah.
I was interested in that stuff and even video games because I noticed when I was a kid there was certain stuff that I was into, and maybe I bought it and played with it. And years later, I would see it on sale, maybe online or at the store or something, and it was exponentially higher. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe there's some stuff that I'm into that could be worth money in the future. And if I like something, I can buy it and then buy another one and throw it in the closet. I guess unfortunately everybody has this mindset now. That stuff is going to be less rare. But Garyvee was talking about cards, and I was already in the sports, so that's kind of like how I got into cards. But I was into Garyvee because of more motivational type stuff, and I listened to like Tony Robbins and Eric Thomas, like people like that. And I guess it's one of those things where I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I thought I was going to make a good point, but oh yeah, now I remember now. Yeah, so I was listening to a take from Tony Robbins, and it was about finances. It was like after the financial crash, it was like 2012, something like that. And it's this economist who did a great job at predicting when there are going to be recessions and downturns in a sense. And he was, only like, I don't know, some months off or something of like when possibly we have a recession. He predicted 2023 because the baby boomers are going to be entering mass retirement by then. And then you have like the largest group in American history that basically have most of the wealth, if not all the wealth, entering retirement. So you go from like putting money into the system to taking money out of the system. And also that's including investments too. And they're going to try to get into the safest possible investments ever. And then like right before they enter retirement, they get into the most speculative stuff because they need as much money as possible
exactly right.
to retire. Which is also interesting why I'm thinking about, some of the people who are selling some of the higher end sports cards, especially vintage stuff, are they baby boomers or not? Because for a lot of them, it makes sense if you're planning on retiring. Like if you got $1 million car, you might want to sell it. Example would be, unfortunately, this guy died. But he was like a neurologist. And there's some big Babe Ruth cards. I think Mickey Mantle cards. It was like last year, I think that sold. It was like the total amount the family sold for, I don't know, $30 to $40 million. And he unfortunately passed away from COVID. But like that stuff hit the market because of that. But if let's say you're still alive, some people are gonna keep it for the rest of their life, and some people are gonna live a long time. But like, it's just one of those things where it's like, especially with this downturn, right? Like stocks crashed or whatever, real estate may be slowing down. So it's like, oh, I'm planning on retiring the next couple of years. Let me maybe not sell all of them, but sell some of my top cards or whatever to help me into retirement. Since maybe if you bought stuff in the 70s or 80s or 90s or even early 2000s, it's like it's way more worth now. So you might as well just cash out. And I guess I was wondering like how many people maybe who are baby boomers saw stuff just go crazy, let's say 2021, and just decide to sell it. And maybe there was like a transfer from older people to younger people in a sense.
Yeah, you make a really interesting point about the year 2023. And I don't know if you've heard of Elliott wave theory. They use sentiment in terms of technical analysis they use waves. And these guys that I follow, one of them is Avi Gilbert. And there's, I think, Robert Prechter too, but I follow Avi Gilbert. And he's talking about 2023 to 2024. He's seeing something on the technical side. And he hires fundamental guys, technical guys, etc. But he uses his opinion and, he has other strategists as well. And he's come to a conclusion, 2023, 2024, you're going to see, he says, potentially a 1 to 2 decade bear market. And it could coincide with what you're saying, baby boomers, right?
Yeah.
And retiring. And I'm also looking at this one guy, Martin Armstrong. And I know some people say that, hey, when you say Martin Armstrong, people say, oh, he went to jail. Okay, yeah, sure, he did. But I always say that before I make this argument. And he looks at something that's really strange. It's the cycle of pi. And every 8.6 years, you tend to have something like going wrong. And it looks at different markets. And his conclusion is that, or not conclusion, part of his analysis, he sees something in 2024 as well. And I'm just looking at, okay, you're talking about, okay, baby boomers retiring. This one guy says recession 2023. So this latest pullback we see in the stock market and crypto and cards. So if you have a little bit of run up the next 1-2 years, some of these baby boomers, in my opinion, they're going to be like, I got to get out. I'm retiring. And I think that's when I'm going to probably be cashing out just to be on the safe side. And then, if the cycle is aligned, you buy low and you sell high. And that's what I'm still expecting. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, I still have money, in the retirement fund, but these are just my long-term thoughts. I mean, you can't accurately predict the future, but you could have a sense of, okay, you buy when it's fearful, like a couple of months ago for me, that's the time to be buying. And then when everyone's excited, remember February, March of 2021, everyone thought they were an expert. Everyone was jumping down with the sausage tea sale. I'm not bashing on anyone, but like people were excited, right? People were excited about Fleer 86. Everyone thought that cards would just perpetually double. And no, that's not how markets work. So you just got to use sentiment. And if everyone's on one side of the trade, you got to ask yourself, are these guys just being fooled just by what's going on? And you just do the opposite. Just be a contrarian.
Yeah, I do think there's one more thing that goes my mind that's like affecting there's two things. One, globalization seems to be ending slowly but surely. And that's going to have a large effect on things. And that may be part of the inflation issue, where I look at things like productivity versus not as much productivity. So maybe one way of like improving the economy is improving productivity. So I think a lot of factories, are going to go other places outside of one because it's getting more expensive for China to produce stuff because a lot of people are starting to not want to take those jobs. So they're trying to outsource to other places, except Apple. For whatever reason, Apple wants to double down in China. But a lot of there's starting to be certain things like going back to United States and then also Mexico as well. So more production going closer to home. It may open up more jobs in a sense. I don't know how much that's going to affect immigration and what kind of workers that are going to come to the United States and compete with jobs and all that other stuff. But that's a factor. The other one is technology. I look at it. The biggest technology that kind of like moved the economy forward is the microchip. You have it in cell phones, have it in computers, and then there's a lot of stuff that's based off those technologies or systems or platforms that the microchip uses, that created jobs, created productivity, has made life easier. It seems like, at least from afar, because I'm not really in the tech world, but it seems like that stuff is starting to slow down. Like you buy an iPhone or a phone, is not that much better. The computers don't seem to be like that much better now. Even some of the smart technology type of stuff, it seems like it's been around for a while, and a lot of that stuff isn't improving the way it used to be. So it might be a scramble for people looking for the next big technology to kind of like push the economy forward and have a massive uptick on jobs, productivity, and just solving problems in a sense. I think, people think NFTs and crypto and stuff, but and that's also um that like the world is kind of struggling with, as far as like improving the economy and having more money in the system to so people can invest and put it to other things such as sports cars and collectibles. But also, from the way I look at it, normally what happens for a lot of collectibles is stuff normally goes well in traditional markets first, and then those people take some of that money out and want to diversify and then put it in those collectibles. And I don't see a lot of this stuff as far as cards, even comics, even video games, especially pop culture type stuff, doesn't seem as productive. It's almost like you're sloshing money around, what most people are doing. They're buying cars or buying a comic book or something, and they're holding it, and they're going to sell it at a higher price. Even certain cryptocurrencies are like this, and it's like not even. I don't see the use in a sense. So I wonder like how this is going to affect the market. So I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you.
Yeah. So the way that I've looked at the collectibles market, and I've delved into precious metals to trade it, and I've made many mistakes. I've lost money in it, but through that loss of money, I've learned a few, I think, important details about precious metals and collectibles. And I know it's not going to delve into what you just stated, but for these collectibles, what I've noticed, and also with precious metals, they tend to do well in a negative interest rate environment. I know it may be a little bit over the head of some of the people that are listening, but I look at the treasury inflation protected securities. If that yield is negative, you tend to see collectibles doing well. If you tend to see the treasury inflected, if you see the tips yield positive, that's when the prices are usually correcting. So in terms of productivity improvements and what you were just talking about in efficiencies in the economy, that is great for an economy, but I don't look at that to determine, okay, our collectibles going to go up because of efficiencies in the economy? I'm looking at it from what sophisticated money is probably doing. And I've looked at data from the 1970s. 1970s collectibles did pretty well. And they corrected in an environment when the economy was actually booming under Reagan. I think the boom started 1982. And collectibles, I mean, sure, people bought collectibles, but they didn't yield that high return. The return came when, I think it was from 87, after the crash of 87 to about 1994. So what happened was they were lowering interest rates from 87 because of the crash, and you had the S&L crisis. And then what happened was, at the same time, you had people that are slightly older than me. They were young and they had their parents buy them cards at stores. And then people a little older than that, in their 50s and 60s, they just started speculating in sports cards as an investment. And then if you look at 1994, the bond market crashed. The bond market crashed because the Federal Reserve was aggressively raising interest rates, and you had positive interest rate environment. So you had a negative interest rate environment where it boomed, positive interest rate environment where collectibles didn't do so hot. And then you had a correction where, okay, you were raising interest rates to about 2020 or 2000, and tech boom happened, and then everything came tumbling down. So long story short, collectibles, in my opinion, if you look at a normal environment, right? What I'm trying to say is in an inflationary environment, they tend to do well. They didn't do well this time around because we were in a pandemic. Okay. So that was a whole different story. And everything came tumbling down aggressively when the Fed started raising rates. That was one aspect. And then the economy started to open up last year. That was the first fall. And the second fall was the Fed this year, in my opinion.
One thing, there may be a little bit of a pushback on that theory, just because after the sports card market crashed, a lot of people, I believe, got into toys, and Beanie Babies was kind of like a thing in the mid to late 90s, for a while. So that was like a weird thing as well. Obviously, Beanie Babies are non. That's I'm assuming certain things, maybe like MetaZoo, some of this really speculative stuff, card stuff, is probably going to go the way of Beanie Babies. Just I don't, because I don't see a reason why people want it outside of is going up in price. But I think I heard of that, comics, and there are a few other things that kind of came out of nowhere. Like Pokemon was huge from 1999 to 2021. And I think comic books had like a crash in like around 99. A lot of stuff, Beanie Babies comics, a lot of other stuff like crashed around 1999. And I don't think
2000s, right?
Yeah.
2000, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it had much necessarily to do with like the .com bubble. Maybe a little bit, because maybe some people were like in both, but it seemed like it may have been like its own thing. Because I'm getting into other collectible markets and trying to see how things work. Because I know, like, for example, comic books for example, comic books has been pretty strong though, just because of the Marvel movies and stuff like that. But when at the start of the big sports card boom, comics were pretty stagnant for the most part though. And then they started going up when Garyvee was talking about Marvel cards, and people started getting into Marvel, and then people started getting into comic books or whatever. And I wonder, like, how much does this have to do with like Garyvee talking about like, oh, I'm gonna buy this, and they just noticed. Same for content creators too. Whatever comes out of Garyvee's mouth, I've noticed like that narrative, content creators just start talking about it as it's almost as is law in a sense.
That's an interesting point. Going to 99, 2000. Interesting point. The Federal Reserve, I think, was aggressively raising interest rates during the .com bubble. So that's just one point. That's maybe I could do a video on that, or do it during a live stream to discuss more about it. Now, in terms of Garyvee and his impact on collectibles and comic books, I do remember the Action, was it the Action Comics? One of the very famous, I'm not a comic book guy, but I think I read that one of the comic books, I think it was maybe last year, it sold for over $2 million. It's the most in demand comic, one of the most in demand. So yeah, you could say on the low end, Garyvee may have an impact, but on the high end, like, you have no impact of influential marketing. I mean, just look at the recent sale of the Honus Wagner, right? You've seen a lot of, you could say, people always say, hey, I'm negative, this and that, despite me being negative and other channels that are much larger that are, you could say, negative. You still had that Honus Wagner card sell for $7.2 million. The Mickey Mantle card is going to sell, the SGC 9.5, over $5 million,
True.
and it could break the Honus Wagner sales. So yes, influencer marketing may artificially bump up the price, just like you saw with the Fleer 86 card. But in terms of longer term trends of collectibles that you could say have intrinsic value, I don't consider Beanie Babies to have intrinsic value. There may be a few select Beanie Babies. I think if you were to sell some of them, they could be worth still thousands of dollars, but there's no intrinsic demand. Some people say that the Funko Pops that I collect, the sports ones, they believe that it has no intrinsic value, which, you know, everyone is entitled to their opinion. I just like collecting, you know, I have a Tom Brady, Edelman, Gronk Funko Pop, right? Bought it for 100 something bucks. It's $300, right? It's whatever the market price is, but you know, it is what it is.
So there's a couple things. So one, I'm actually going to be making more fringe stuff like the pop culture cards. That stuff is starting to come down. Apparently, Mark Zuckerberg has a sports card. He has like a little league card or whatever. That's like Pop One, graded by SGC, and he signed. That's going to be going to auction, and they're making an NFT of it. So I wonder what that's going to sell for. And one of my thoughts was like, if this sells for a lot of money, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be, they're going to be trying to, like, if there's like little league sports or whatever going on, or even high school, they're going to be trying to make cards of all their players or whatever, and get them to sign them and maybe hold them and try to sell them or whatever. I don't know, like, what do you think about like the future of pop culture type cards?
So Fanatics is going to be big in this hobby, as we know. And I've heard rumors that they've already, I'm not going to name names, but I've heard rumors that they've already have affiliations with some content creators. And once they come up with the licensing, it's going to be made official. So if you have a popular YouTuber or Instagram guy or gal, they may artificially hype up these cards. So there may be a stretch to be like, hey, look at this Mark Zuckerberg card. I mean, this is an amazing card, right? And then they may come up with some other pop icon guys, maybe the Beatles, maybe Michael Jackson, maybe the list goes on. And then you could have that demand going towards these type of individuals. And, you know, it just depends what Fanatics is doing. I mean, could someone be buying the Mark Zuckerberg card? Sure. But I think it would be more in the lines of a famous celebrity, you know, Elvis. Maybe they have, you know, a triple logo man of Elvis, someone on the Beatles, Michael Jackson, you know, something like that. And be like, oh, that's cool, right? And they may buy something like that. So,
okay, yeah, it's you have. I'm a little skeptical of certain kind of pop culture cards, just because, let's say, even Elvis memorabilia. There are a few things, very small things in the market that are maintaining their value or going up, but mostly everything else for Elvis is going down in price. And there's certain people who held it long term, or maybe selling it for pennies of a dollar than what they bought it for. Just because a lot of younger generations don't care about Elvis like that. And even the perception of who Elvis was changes in a sense, and the narratives. Maybe it's like all this positive stuff, but then it's like maybe negative stuff about his character shines light on, and people look at it more like that. So that's kind of like the concern because I just remember people were buying like Justin Bieber and Drake autograph cards and Jay-Z cards and stuff. And I think stuff for like millennials, maybe, that's fine for a period of time. and maybe if the person transcends to like Gen Z, but if they don't, I guess I'm like skeptical whether people necessarily care about those cards. So you go ahead.
Yeah, it just depends. And I think what drives the market for some of these cards, if you look at the Marvel PMGs, yes, they did look nice, but that was artificially hyped, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I believe some of these niche markets, I thought F1 was artificially hyped.
Mm-hmm.
I thought some people were pumping it up. So PMGs I thought were pumped up. And then now some people are getting into Disney cards, right? And once I saw some content creators going into Disney cards, I'm like, I have to sell a few 1930s Mickey Mouse cards because Golden was selling, and then PSA said, "Oh, we're starting to sell these." And then I see content creators, "Oh, I'm interested." And then I messaged one of the guys that I follow, Pink Analytics, and I'm like, "Dude, I'm about to sell some of this stuff." Once I see some content creators, when you could have bought these cards on the cheap, even during the hype of 2020, 2021, no one was touching it. Now they're interested because they want to go to the what they believe is the least or the cheapest cards out there that no one's looking at. And then you influence it, and then all of a sudden, you could put interesting valuations on cards. Some Star Wars cards, I believe, had overvalued valuations.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I think there's that short time frame. If people have those cards and someone keeps on hyping it up, I would probably sell them. That's just me, but
that's true. Yeah, there's certain things that kind of got me. One is like for people who are hyping up UFC cards. So I'm like a fan of UFC, and I actually watch fights and stuff like that. And I was like disturbed that people are hyping up UFC cards trying to buy UFC fighters, just because if your argument is you only buy quarterbacks because everybody else gets hurt, you don't need to be buying UFC cards unless they're retired, because like you're literally punching and kicking someone in the face, like you're choking. I like do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and I've done Taekwondo, so it's like it's like a really dangerous situation. Kind of, I don't know if you know, but like Conor McGregor like broke his leg in the middle of a fight or whatever. Yeah. And this is actually happening more often because I happened to Anderson Silva before. So yeah, it's like that kind of problem. And then also people are pumping Conor McGregor. That's the other thing. Like people are worried about, players having these, how do I say, controversies in a sense. And you're always going to have athletes have them. At some point, Cristiano Ronaldo had one. Kobe Bryant had his. Like, there's going to be some popular athlete, whether they did it or not, depending on what it is, they're going to have this controversy. But, like, some people, I don't know. Like, Conor McGregor has done a bunch of stuff and been accused for a lot of stuff where it's like, I don't know if people really should be pumping his cards. I don't really care as much when people pump cards, but like there's some people it's just like him or John Jones who like, I don't know, he ran over a pregnant lady while high on cocaine. He steroids multiple times. The domestic violence thing with his fiance. And I think she's like pressed charges against him. Like that's a dude who's and he's like the best fighter ever, right? Like I guess him is George St. Pierre, but he's just like he could have been the LeBron James of like fighting, but like all his troubles like really messed up his reputation. But his talent is undeniable. Even he's gone from he's going to probably fight at the end of this year and probably make a lot of history. But it's like guys like that, Conor McGregor, same thing, where, you know, I don't know, assault cases against him. He punched the old guy in the pub. He bought the club and then like forced the dude to basically ban the dude. Him getting in fights with celebrities. What he said about Dustin Poirier's wife. This is all that stuff. So I don't know like what's people's mindset on stuff like this when the controversy happened. Because I even saw the sports card investor bought like Deshaun Watson, and that's a not the best topic either.
Right. Yeah, I'll leave it on this note, and we have to go. But in regarding to UFC, you know, this opens up so many things I want to talk about. But there was this Khabib card that I bought, and it was $25 raw. I've talked about this a lot of times. 2013 Blue Refractor. It was numbered, and this was before the hype, before people got in, before people like Garyvee said that what's his name, McGregor is on the top 5 of athletes should be on Mount Rushmore or whatever, which I found to be like, what?
Maybe popularity, but
popularity, yeah, he's definitely opened up that sport. There's no doubt about that. In terms of hype, yeah, he's great at it. But yeah, this Khabib card got for $25. I sent it to PSA Express grading before it shut down.
mm-hmm.
And it came out a PSA 10. I don't know what the value of it is, but I bought that card before that hype, before everyone's like had eyeballs on it, because the population count is so low of especially the older players. So yeah, it's just so strange where you could have bought these cards literally 2 years ago, summer of 2020, during the pandemic, and you could have made a ridiculous amount of money. Now it was just pumped up, right? Everyone's eyeballs like, hey, UFC, right? They're like, okay, basketball's too high, Mahomes cards are way too high. What's next? Let's look at weird sports. And then some people were looking at boxing, some people were looking at UFC. I was looking at some tennis. And then that's how it goes. So people are just trying to find the next biggest not investment, but just the cheapest card out there. They're trying to be like hedge funds, and you know, this is what happens. So anything that gets hyped up by these influencers, hopefully you have some of those cards, and when it's being hyped up like crazy and they're talking about it really excited, really giddy, that's not the time to buy, in my opinion. It's probably the time to sell.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I will like say I guess say this final note. A lot of this actually happened in 86 to 94, especially in the 90s. They were pumping up NASCAR at that time and other kind of fringe sports. A lot of that stuff didn't last. UFC and I guess soccer has some promise decades from now, but it's still super early as far as for collectors, because they're kind of the backbone, and then investors.
Indeed.
But yeah, thanks. It's been it's like been really great talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again.